Mabrika, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Taíno. I'm your host, Priscilla Colon, co-founder and creative here at Kasike, where our mission is to promote the Taíno language and culture. So today I want to talk about perspective. That is the way that you see the world influenced by your past experiences? And how did this influence how we see Taínos today? So I'll give you an example of what I mean. If I say to you, carpenter, what kind of person do you see in your mind? Well, if you're like most people in the US, you probably didn't think of a woman. Why? Because we live in a patriarchal society, or at least our roots are in patriarchy. And of course, this perspective can actually skew reality. So what happened when the Spaniards met the Taínos? The Taínos and the Spaniards had very different perspectives. They came from different cultures. So what the Spanish heard wasn't always exactly what the Taínos meant. So we're going to take a look at a few words today. So, quick background on the Spaniards. We know that they came from a patriarchal society, where the king was at the very top, followed by noblemen, and then everyone else was a peasant, a worker. So when they came to the Americas, this is what they expected. Besides the word Kasike, the Spanish also heard words such as naboria, which means worker or servant, Taíno, and nitaíno. So based on these words and based on the perspective that they already brought with them, the Spanish assumed that Kasike was a king, that nitaíno were noblemen, and that naboria were the peasants, everyone else. And they assumed that all of the natives they were meeting were calling themselves Taínos because that was like their name for each other. So let's take a look at Kasike, which we've talked about before. We know that Kasike means chief, and it is not a king or a governor. The chief's job was really to assign the task, make sure everyone was doing what they were supposed to, and to make sure that everyone got the food that they needed. He was also a spiritual or religious leader. He would go into trances and ask this great spirit whether they should go to war or maybe form an alliance, etc. And as you've learned before, a Taíno cacique could be male or female. There were at least 4 different female cacique when the Spanish first came. And last but not least, in my research I've found that not every village had a cacique. Some villages were just led by a group of elders. So we can tell that the Spanish perspective was not correct when it came to Kasike, or the leadership of the Taínos. How about with the words Taíno and nitaíno? The Spanish heard these words on a couple of occasions. Once they were on a ship nearing an island and the women came out calling and waving Taíno. The second occasion, there were a group of Taíno men pointing spears and arrows at the Spanish, obviously angry and agitated, and saying Taíno, nitaíno, almost as if to say, identify yourself. Recently, linguists decided to look at the origins of the words Taíno and nitaíno to figure out if their original meaning was correct. So we know from past videos that Taíno, based on its word parts, means good people, and that is exactly what the Spanish said that it meant. But during the research, the linguists tried to establish whether or not the word Tai meant good. We know that no at the very end is plural for humans. We hear it in the words Taíno and Locono, which literally means the people in Locono. But how about Tai? So first they looked at Arawak and sister languages to try to figure out the word good in all of them. As you can tell, there aren't a lot of similarities. The closest is probably Kalinago, which has Lao or Tao, similar to Thai, but it wasn't conclusive. Next, linguists looked at a translation of the Lord's Prayer, which was created in the 1800s. Now, I gotta say, the Lord's Prayer, Taínos were not Christians, so you know that that was created by somebody who was. So in this translation of the Lord's Prayer, the person who wrote the translation used a word han to mean amen and to mean good in several instances. We know that han means yes in Taíno, and han is similar to son, which is used in another sister language. So it's still pretty inconclusive. So then we have to look at the word nitaíno. So when we look at similar words to nitaíno in the Arawakan sister languages, we find a nice surprise. Whether it is my relatives, family, there's even one that means son or friend. So it has to do with kinship. So nitaíno is some sort of person related to you. So linguists' current assumptions are that nitaíno could have meant water relatives, because they see ni at the beginning, and it kind of makes sense if you go from island to island saying, hey, nitaíno, I'm one of your water relatives. I live on another island. So that's one theory. Another theory is that nitaíno literally meant my relatives, because in some Arawakan languages, ni and nu is used at the beginning to mean my. But of course, in other Arawakan languages, ta and da is used at the beginning to mean me or my, such as duck, right? Yet another theory is that nitaíno, if you look at nita at the very beginning, could have meant my blood, because the word hita is blood. So there are three different theories about what the actual word nitaíno meant, but it definitely did not mean nobleman. So could Taíno mean good people and family? Yeah, of course it could. It could have many different meanings, layers of meaning, depending on how it was used. So let's take a look at a word that you may be familiar with if you speak Spanish. The word is bonito, and nowadays it's used to mean cute, pretty. But the original meaning of the word was not that. Let's take a look at the word parts. So bonito has two word parts. Bon, which is a short form of bueno, which means good, and ito, which is a little part at the end, a suffix that is added to mean little. So the original meaning of bonito was a little good, and it's actually the diminutive form of good. So you have buenísimo, which is great, bueno, which is good, and bonito, little good. Of course, we don't use it like that every day. We now mean cute or pretty. So as you can see, many words, depending on the word parts, have one meaning, and then in common use have a different meaning. They evolve. So the lesson for today is, let's think about perspective when we're studying languages, especially if it has been seen through the filter of the colonizers, for example. We know that Taíno probably meant good people and probably closer to family. Nitaíno is probably closer to my family, my relatives. And Naboria, we know, are workers. But that makes sense because everyone had a job to do in Taíno society. It does mean that Taíno society was not a hierarchical society, just like the Spanish. One of the coolest things I've learned doing this research is just how the Taínos saw themselves as family. So whether you were on the island of Haiti, Kasike, on Boriken, on Kubanacan, on Yamayeka, we were all family, and that is a beautiful message. So thank you again for subscribing to this channel. I know that together we can bring back Taíno. And please don't forget our children's books. This is a wonderful way to get kids to learn Taíno words and phrases. Until next time, Tai Karaya Guaitiao Nago.